Russ, are you really going to do bonus episodes the next few weeks going over the potential fit for the entire New Orleans Saints draft class, starting with Bryan Bresee? Yeah, I've done it before, and I'll do it again. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome in to a live episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss the latest episode. And of course, as always, I am your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network, Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation site covering the New Orleans Saints. You can catch me Tuesdays on Locked On NFL and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Big shout out to all the everydayers out there and everybody live here catching the show. We're going to be doing some live episodes here throughout the week, breaking down the fit for every single member of the New Orleans Saints draft class, and we'll even get into some UDFAs as well. I'll go over the schedule here in a little bit, but I do want to let you know today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Don't forget to check out FanDuel.com/LockedOn today so you can get that no sweat first bet of up to up to $1,000. A lot more than that. So make sure you go and check them out today over at FanDuel. I'll tell you more about them later. On today's episode, we're taking a look at Bryan Bresee. In tomorrow's episode, the first show, we're going to get into UDFAs. We're going to get into Cesar Ruiz's fifth-year option, but I wanted to focus on one guy for this evening episode of Locked On Saints, which we'll do live throughout the week. Don't forget to smash that like button. Y'all are on it. I appreciate y'all very much for being here and for checking us out here on the show. So let's get today started. We're going to take a look at the fact that this guy's got future team captain potential. What can he mean for the New Orleans Saints off the field? We'll take a look at the future for Bryan Bresee, but let's start with the present. Where should you expect him to fit in for the New Orleans Saints in 2023? And the answer to that question is, of course, the defensive interior, but how often will you expect to see him? I think the answer to that is that expect to see him pretty often. Remember, the New Orleans Saints lost their long-time guys. The guys like Shai Tuttle, the guys like David Onyemata. Kentavious Street was only with them for a year, but he was a big-time contributor for the Saints, both in the run game as well as in the pass rush. Made several really nice moves and progress and things like that for New Orleans. But the thing that you look at next for them is, where are they in terms of the state of their roster? They signed Khalen Saunders, the run-stopping 320-plus pound defensive tackle, but don't get it twisted. He's got some nice feet, can get disruptive in the pass game as well. Nathan Shepherd was top 10 in the NFL according to Pro Football Focus when it came to last year's collection of defensive ends and edge rushers when it came to pass rush win rate. That's the percentage of time that you as a defensive lineman win your one-on-ones with opposing offensive linemen and blockers and things like that. So you look at that. You look at Khalen Saunders and how he fits in. Maybe he's a little bit more of a run stopper, but can get disruptive. The Saints bring back Malcolm Roach, who has shown his flashes in the pass rushing game as well. Well, the pass rush, though, is Bryan Bresee's specialty, but he can be impactful for you in the run game as well, especially considering his ability to shed blocks and his eye discipline. You've heard me talk about this quite a bit, even when it was before he was drafted, when you started to look at things like started to look at things like the draft mock drafts and player previews and player spotlights that we did here on the show. We really kind of leaned in on that eye discipline part. And when I talk about eye discipline, what I mean by that is that when he's locked up with an offensive lineman that's blocking him, his eyes don't drop. He doesn't come down to the offensive lineman that he's wrestling with or grappling with. He's looking over that offensive lineman. Helps that he's like 6'5", looking over the offensive lineman and looking into the backfield to see Where's the play going? Who has the ball? Where's the ball headed? Where should I be shedding to try to make this play? Should I shed to the inside? Should I shed to the outside? All of those things. So that's a big thing for the New Orleans Saints. It's something that has caused their defense problems in the past. You've heard Cam Jordan talk about it. You have heard you've heard Dennis Allen talk about it. Like, you've heard all of those things in terms of the ability to be able to like see how things are developing and all of that. So that's a big piece that I think means that you will see Bryan Bresee on the field pretty often because of what he can bring you in the run game. But of course, the trademark is what he can bring you as a pass rusher, his ability to be disruptive, his ability to be able to clog up the pocket and to be able to disrupt the pocket, disrupt timing for the quarterbacks by getting pressure right up the middle. All of these are going to be things that he's going to be able to add to this New Orleans Saints team, assuming, of course, that the medicals that we expect to be good and that the Saints expect to be good going into 23 are indeed good going into 2023. So I would say you're probably expecting Bryan Bresee to play something like 50 to 60% of snaps. Now, maybe that starts 30 to 40% of snaps early on in the season, but as the season rolls along, if he's staying healthy and if he's developing as the New Orleans Saints expect that he will with a very safe floor beneath him, he's probably getting 50 to 60% of snaps at defensive tackle and could be one of your starters on the interior. I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting early snaps, early downs, early quarters, early weeks when it comes to this year's schedule. In week 1, in week 2, in week 3. I do think that you end up seeing Bryan Bresee contributing to this New Orleans Saints defense early and pretty often. And I think that's a good news for the New Orleans Saints because that's what you want when you invest a first round pick. I know they didn't trade up. I know they did an old stick and pick over at 29 and things like that, but still, he's a first round pick. He's a day 1 and or day 2 pick. You expect those guys to have some pretty major impact, particularly rounds 1 and round 2. I think that with Bryan Bresee, you're going to be able to get that. So as long as the medicals check out and he's able to stay healthy. Now, I'm going to continue to caveat that because that is the part that is the biggest question of this New Orleans Saints draft class. 2 years removed from an ACL tear, just a year removed from a shoulder surgery, kidney infection that caused him to miss some games in 2022, chalk that up to being fluky, things like that. But I think you're looking at him as being like maybe the biggest question mark. And that's kind of good news. If he's the biggest question mark, that's great for the New Orleans Saints because he's not that big of a question. Like, you really just need to know if he can stay on the field. And so far, so good when it comes to that. This is an interesting question. Someone asked in the chat, Clean Hands Hoss, who says, most comparable to Sue, question mark. I think I might not compare him to Ndamukong Suh because Ndamukong Suh was maybe a little bit more like bigger, manhandle, throw guys out of the way. I don't think that's Bryan Bresee's game. I think he's a little bit more disruptive as a pass rusher because of his ability to finesse on the interior. So I think maybe something like Michael Brockers comes to mind, a young Michael Brockers, a guy that's able to contribute to you in the run game, but is able to be disruptive because he moves a lot more quickly than you expect that he's able to at his size on the interior, and therefore he's getting after the passer. So I kind of feel like that's maybe around where he is. I mean, you could even say David Onyemata to an extent in terms of having that quicker than fast type of, I'm faster than the offensive lineman, or I'm quicker than the offensive lineman in front of me. I can bend, I can get leverage, I can own this. The thing that you want to see Bryan Bresee develop in the near future as we wrap up his near day fit is going to be his ability to be able to counter. Can he develop more counter pass rushing moves and be able to utilize his leverage as he develops as a pass rusher? So that's where I think you should expect to see him in 2023. 3-tech, attacking pass rusher, maybe on the field for a lot of passing downs, might come off the field for some rundowns in certain situations, but for the most part, growing all throughout 2023 in terms of his snap count. So what is the expectation for him 3-4 years down the line? Now, we have to have a little bit of fun and get to projections. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, #1 sportsbook in all of America, and they're here partnering with us here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your #1 daily podcast network in all of America. So very glad to be able to partner with these guys. If you bet on some of those NFL draft odds, Lord knows. I mean, things were just kind of wacky for the NFL draft, but it's always a lot of fun. If you want to continue on with betting season, there's the NBA Finals, there's the MLB underway. There's so much for you to check out, and you can find it all over at FanDuel Sportsbook. And you can download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today. It's free, super easy to use, safe, secure. And if you're a first-time customer, listen to this, you're going to be able to go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's going to enter you in your, give you the chance to get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets with that no-sweat first bet. So make sure you check that out today at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Make sure you come back tomorrow. We got another 2 episodes for you. First one is going to be taking a look at some of the undrafted free agents that you need to know on the offensive side. On the defensive side, we'll give a shout out to some of the specialists as well, because boy, is there a story when it comes to Lou Headley, the punter out of Miami, Australian-born. What an incredible story. So we'll get to all of that, and we'll also break down what it means that the New Orleans Saints didn't pick up Cesar Ruiz's 5th-year option. Does that mean that they don't intend on extending him on a long-term deal? Not necessarily, and we'll explain why in tomorrow's episode, so make sure you come back for that. And then in the evening, we'll go live again, probably right around this same time today, to discuss Isaiah Foskey's fit with the New Orleans Saints. So let's get to the big sort of question about what it is that he has the opportunity to turn into over time. Appreciate you, Mr. Jerry, for being here. Appreciate you, Ninth Ward Larry, for being here as well, and everybody for coming through here in the chat. Make sure you drop some questions in the chat as well, because I'll grab those questions and answer some of those in the pre-recorded morning episodes for you as well. So I'll comb back through the chat and grab some of those questions. Make sure you drop those in there. So let's discuss what Bryan Bresee can be in future years. And I'm seeing some really good comparisons to Bryan Bresee here in the chat. I'm terrible at comparisons, not really my thing. I kind of look at every prospect as a prospect. But I do think that, like, if you want to take a look at where Bryan Bresee should be in 3 years, I don't think that the idea of where maybe David Onyemata was his 2nd or 3rd year is a bad sort of spot or a bad sort of barometer or measuring stick for where Bryan Bresee pans out. Because the 2nd, 3rd years of David Onyemata, we were talking about him being one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL, hands down. Now, of course, not to the Aaron Donald level, but you could have put him up there with the Ndamukong Suhs. You could have put him up there with the Vita Veas, those guys that are really disruptive on the defensive line. And maybe that's all that you're looking for when it comes to Bryan Bresee. I don't think you're looking at him and saying, yeah, he could become the greatest defensive player that we've ever watched in terms of like Aaron Donald or anything like that. I'm not going to hold out those comparisons. But I think when you're looking at a career trajectory where David Onyemata's career was expected to go with the New Orleans Saints, I think is a good measuring stick. And obviously you want that or better because Bryan Bresee is somebody they've invested a 1st-round selection in. But you have to imagine that in 3-4 years, maybe even 1 year, 2 years down the line, you're expecting Bryan Bresee to basically be a 3-down guy for you and an every-down guy for you on the defensive line. And I think that that's what he would like to be as well. He said he's feeling, and I know we hear this all the time with players coming off of injury, he's feeling 100%, didn't really get to feeling 100% until around his pro day and the combine and stuff like that. So at least he's trending in the right way, didn't have any issues during the combine, didn't have any issues during his pro day. We'll see how all of this stuff is. But I agree down here, we have a chat that says that like 5 sacks would be great in 2023. Completely agree. And maybe you're thinking like, okay, 6 to 7. Remember, he plays in the defensive interior. You're probably not going to get to double-digit sacks if you're an interior defensive guy. If he does, fantastic. But if you get and you're hovering somewhere between 6 to 10 sacks with the guy per year, you're getting really, really good pass rushing production from your defensive tackle. And remember that pass rush is not all about the sacks, although the almost sacks that the New Orleans Saints have racked up over the years has even gone so far as to irritate Cam Jordan when they're talked about. And so I think when you have, the opportunity here with a Bryan Bresee to come in and be this disruptive pass rusher for you, you can start to think about, okay, where do they want this guy to be in 2 or 3 years? And I do think that hovering between that 7 to 10, 6 to 10 sack range is kind of where you'd like to see him. But as I was saying, sorry, looping back around to my point. It's like I said the other day, I got a lot of off days, but I ain't often that I'm off the clock. So I think you look at where instead Bryan Bresee can be with that is how many pressures is he getting? I mean, we saw David Onyemata pace the New Orleans Saints' entire defensive tackle room combined in pressures just a year ago with like just over 30. Not great, Bob. I mean, you'd like to see a lot more pressures coming from the defensive interior, and you'd like to see your leader in pressures on the defensive interior hovering at a little bit more than 30, get into the 40 range, things like that. How many times can he get a hit on the quarterback? How many times can he get his hands up and deflect a pass? How many times can he, make a quarterback change their arm trajectory and throw an errant pass that lands in the hands of a Saints defensive back? Those are the other things that you're looking for that quantify the impact of Bryan Bresee. And if you're the Saints, you want that impact as quickly as possible, but you're certainly hoping for it in a handful of years or so. So I think that Bryan Bresee has the real opportunity here to be able to become the Saints' long-term starter in the defensive interior. It's going to require him to stay healthy. It's going to require him to get productive. Remember, he wasn't super productive in college. 9 sacks, 15 tackles for a loss during his time at Clemson over the course of 3 years. Could be a little bit underwhelming, but also have to understand the context, injuries, family tragedy, all of these other things that he was kind of dealing with. And if you're not familiar with this story, please head over to NOLA.com today and check out Taryn Walk's piece on Bryan Bresee. The last place that his little sister, who passed away at 15 years old after an 18-month-long fight with brain cancer, saw him play was in the Superdome here in New Orleans. And now that's the place that he calls home. What beautiful symmetry amidst tragedy. Taryn captured it beautifully. So make sure you go and check that out if you want to learn a little bit more about his story. But his story, his ability to manage adversity, his ability to be able to persevere, his ability to be resilient, all of those things are things that you simply want in a football player. His second, third effort type pressures that he might be able to get. Those types of effort plays, the motor plays to where you're making a play and a tackle outside the tackle box because you read a screen pass right, or you tracked and moved laterally well to track down a running back on the outside. Those are the other impactful things that you're going to want to see him develop over time. So while he might be a little specialized early on in his career, later in his career, as he gets more comfortable with the scheme, as he gets more comfortable in the system, as the system gets more comfortable around him, as he and the players begin to communicate a little bit better. One of the things he did really well in college was taking up double teams and affording one-on-one opportunities for the guys on the outside. Those things will begin to matter in a few years' time when he's playing more and more snaps, where he's one of the first defensive tackles out and he's one of the last defensive tackles off. That's what you're looking for him in the next few years. So there's a lot of really, really good stuff in terms of that. I got a quick question here that I do think is worth addressing before we move on to his impact off the field. This is going to change the subject just a little bit, but Young Sparkin asks, what's the deal with Kendre Miller and his injury? This is pretty simple. It's an MCL sprain. It's something that you and I can get walking down the street. I mean, I could tear an ACL walking down the street because I'm old and out of shape. But when it comes down to the MCL sprain, I wouldn't be super worried about it. Everything that we've been told is that he'll be ready for training camp, though he'll probably take it easy during mini camps and OTAs. So don't be distressed if you hear that. Training camp is what's going to matter for Kendre Miller. Now we're going to get back to Bryan Bresee. Let's take a look at Bryan Bresee's fit off the field and how he'll be able to contribute to the New Orleans Saints as a leader, maybe sooner rather than later, and how that could actually end up lifting him up to some pretty important status here in New Orleans. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a quick look at Bryan Bresee. We broke down sort of where his fit is in the immediate future. We broke down where his fit can be in terms of what the Saints hope that he'll develop into over time. So now the thing that I want to get to here is, what do you look at, or what do you find in Bryan Bresee when it comes to his off-the-field ability to be able to contribute? Who is he off the field? And so I just kind of discussed a little bit some of the things. Of course, Young Sparkin, no problem. Thank you for asking the question. I just kind of discussed some of the things that make him Bryan Bresee, the person, the man, the human, all of those things. And a massive part of that is the tragedy that he and his family faced off the field, and his ability to be resilient, his ability to persevere, his ability to manage and navigate and really come out on the opposite side of adversity, not hardened, but matured. And I think those things tend to point in the direction of a player that can be a leader in your locker room. He has all the makings of it. He's got the high character. He's got the maturity. He's got the love, the passion for the game. He's playing for somebody every single weekend. And that is the probably pinnacle of what it is that you would expect from him and everything. Sorry if there was an ad that popped up in the live stream there. Something I think got a little weird, but I think we should be good here. And so when you think about who he is as a leader, I think this is a guy that could be a team captain in a matter of, let's just say, his rookie contract, right? Including the 5th-year option, maybe. I think what you're looking at when it comes to his ability to be able to come through and be somebody that the rest of the team looks to as a leader, the rest of the team looks to as a player that they can look up to, that they can be mentored by, all of that. As long as he stays healthy and continues the sort of trajectory in terms of his ability to be able to produce on the field, then I think that that's a pretty good situation in terms of what you're going to get from a leader out of Bryan Bresee. So I do think that Bryan Bresee, if, again, the caveat, right? If he stays healthy, if all the things goes well, he could potentially be a team captain for you within his rookie contract, or if he signs a second contract with the team. If he ain't signing a second contract with the team, then you're probably not seeing that before that contract is up. But if everything goes well, I think he could be one of those guys. And I think that's a big focus for the New Orleans Saints. If you look at their draft class here, Bresee was a leader on his team. Foskey was a team captain. Nick Saldiveri was a team captain. Pretty sure Jake Haener was a team captain. You've got Kendre Miller, who was a leader within his running back room. Same thing for guys like A.T. Perry and Jordan Howden. They were leaders within their room, and they were active in the community and all these things. Like that's the makeup. That's the thing. We spoke about it not too long ago, that one of the big criterion for the New Orleans Saints every single season is, who are the guys that are going to fit in the locker room? Who are the guys that are going to be able to come in and be high character guys? They're going to be able to contribute to the community. They're going to be a part of the growth and success of the franchise off the field as well as on the field. I think Bryan Bresee can be one of those guys for you. He certainly has the attitude for it, and it's certainly something that the Saints have seeked out, that they did seek out, I guess I'll say, ahead of the 2023 NFL draft, because it was clearly, and really 2022, like we saw that there too. So we know how much character, makeup, all these other things matter to the New Orleans Saints. So I really, really like what they're able to do there. So if you get somebody that, let's just say 3.5 to 5.5 sacks his rookie season, then he gets up to 5.5 kind of being the floor in terms of his sacks, becomes a team captain, is a part of your ability to be able to improve in the running game after ranking 24th in rushing yards last year. If you're looking at him as a guy that becomes a leader, if Khalen Saunders and Nathan Shepherd and Malcolm Roach eventually peel off at some point during his tenure and he gets a second contract with the team, these are all wins for the New Orleans Saints. These are all big time wins for them. And that's really looking at, I don't want to say the floor in terms of his level of production. That's kind of subjective. We'll have to see, like, what's the matchup? How does the offense play? Like, how does the defense play? Are they weak against the run and therefore they don't run? So then you end up not having all they do is run, and therefore you don't have a lot of opportunities to get after the quarterback. There's a lot of things that can factor into what the actual production numbers, the raw numbers look like, but you can see it when you watch on the field. And so if you get somebody that can check all of those boxes and be disruptive, be reliable in the run game, that can be a captain and a leader and all of that, I think that's massively impressive, and I think that's a massive win for the New Orleans Saints as well. So there's a lot of really cool stuff I think you're going to be able to see from Bryan Bresee and the New Orleans Saints. Just to recap, I think immediately you start seeing him at 30-40% of snaps week 1, week 2, and then you eventually start to see that climb to 50-60%. Remember, the Saints are always going to rotate their defensive line, so he's not going to be a 100% snap guy. He's probably never going to be like an 80 or 90% snap guy, not on a game, not through a season, right? Maybe in certain game situations, sure. But I think also you look at the leadership that he brings and the leadership that he had at Clemson, but you also have to look at the scheme fit that Clemson creates. He had experience doing Okie fronts, which if you think about like the Saints in third and long situations where they have 3 down linemen and then 2 linebackers that are threatening the A-gap, and either they'll drop both of those linemen back, linebackers back, maybe you'll drop a lineman back, all of that. But you've seen that front a ton of times for the New Orleans Saints. You also see situations where they come out in an odd front, where they've got 3 defensive linemen or 5 defensive linemen in goal line situations, jumbo sets where you have that extra guy, or bear sets more likely to where you have that 5th guy. Even sets, which is kind of the Saints' base, 4-2-5 defense, 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs, those are the things that he has experience playing in. Those are the things that he has experience doing. And he's done everything from lining up and going nose to nose with the center to lining up all the way to the inside shoulder of the tackle. He's done it all. So the scheme fit, his ability to attack from different alignments, his ability to attack from different positions and techniques, his understanding of all those techniques also helps him understand the responsibilities of the players that line up next to him on a down-by-down basis as well. That's all really good. Those are all really positive traits that you get in Bryan Bresee that impact how quickly he's able to turn things on for the New Orleans Saints. So really the last big question you have for him is the injury history. That's really it. And again, he's 2 years removed from the most important part of that injury history. So I'm not super concerned about it. We'll have to see how he gets through camp and all these other things. You never know. It's the NFL. Injuries happen. But goodness, I mean, if there's a guy you're going to bet on to be, a first-round defensive lineman that's going to have an impact for the New Orleans Saints, Bresee was one of the guys that made the most sense, along with Mazi Smith out of Michigan. But Mazi Smith went to the Dallas Cowboys a few picks ahead. So I love the fit for New Orleans. What's going on, Alan? Thanks for being an everydayer, fam. I appreciate you. I think that, you look at that and then you look at where he's able to contribute as a leader as well. And I think the Saints are in line to have a really, really good player here. A really, really good player. We just have to see if it all pans out. If it translates from potential to reality. And there's a good chance that it does. And that's one of the things I love about this New Orleans Saints draft class is that there's not a lot of those super extreme dynamic guys that are either gonna bang or bust. There's a lot of these guys that instead that like their floor is still pretty manageable and you're gonna like what you're gonna get. So I'm a big fan of all of it. We'll see who Bryan Bresee turns into. So I'm seeing some questions here in the chat. Going to get to those. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna comb through all of the chats here on the live show. Turn those questions into segments for later on in the week, and then we'll have a ton of fun answering those questions. We'll give you shout outs for all that. So if you want to come through and ask some questions, you want to be here in the evenings for the live shows, and if you want to hear the answers to your questions, you're going to want to tune into the next day's show. That'll be a pre-recorded and published show. So we'll have a bunch of good stuff here. Logan, DJ, Kenneth, Austin, I appreciate Trevon, all y'all. I appreciate you being here for the live show. Make sure you check out the pre-recorded episode that'll come out tomorrow. 2-a-days are back, baby, and we're going to be doing these. So for the schedule for this week, expect 2-a-days Monday, Tuesday, possibly Wednesday, because Wednesday's a little bit tough for me with locked on meetings and executive stuff here on the network. But Thursday, Friday, I probably won't do a second episode. It is Jazz Fest weekend after all, so I'm going to go and have me some fun. I'm going to go relax, check out some of the music and stuff like that. But then next week, we'll be right back at it. Publish some pre-recorded shows early, and then we'll do some live shows in the evening so we can kick it, hang out, share some time together. So I appreciate y'all so much for coming through for another episode of Locked on Saints. Tomorrow we'll be taking a look at UDFA's offense, defense, as well as looking at Cesar Ruiz in the fifth-year option, and I'll get to a few of your questions as well. So I appreciate y'all, as always, for coming through for another live episode and checking it out if you're checking it out later as well. And of course, for being here and making me a part of your day, a part of your team, or part of your day, a part of your routine. Excuse me. I'll be a part of your team too. I got you. I'm in your corner. And of course, I appreciate you as always for saying yes to me and the show. As always, please, if you see me, say hi, especially out at Jazz Fest. Please come up. I don't care what I'm doing. Come holler at me. Come say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NNOLA. It's right down there. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your family's doing. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.